Table Talk is not your typical D&D TTRPG podcast. We are not here to run you through our whole campaign.
We're here to talk about everything else in the space of tabletop roleplay.
I'm your host, Alejandra Wilhelm.
And I'm also your host, Mariah Gresham.
And we're your tabletop roleplay girlies.
Hello. Post-production Mariah here. We had far more fun recording with the Slovenly Trulls than one episode could contain. So welcome back to part 2 of our deep dive into Feminist D&D. Enjoy the show.
We covered a lot of that good stuff, but yet I definitely do want to address like both the feminism and the TTRPG space, which we lightly touched on, but then like how that specifically, like I loved how you mentioned in your origins, like realizing that you're playing in these kind of hidden spaces of like full female or like feminine presenting parties, and wondering like, am I playing feminist D&D? And how that influences your games and things like that. Because I definitely can tell like in my personal game that I definitely have a lot of that and how it's shifted and like how it changes my world, because it's very homebrew for me. And I'm like, there are certain things that don't exist here because you come to my table to escape from that shit.
Exactly.
And I don't need to rely on that to make somebody bad.
For sure. Yeah.
But I would love to hear about like how you perceive that affects like your games and what decisions you've made in your own respective games and worlds and how that's like shifted it for you.
Wow. Well, I think after starting the podcast, I feel like my perspective as a GM has changed a little bit more as a player, because for my player brain, I just turn off. I turn off my brain when I'm a player. Like, I'll like, try to find their voice and try to get all, I don't want to say method actor because that's a toxic headspace to get in, but I try to just like turn off my brain, not think too much about my decisions, like think a little bit, but just like turn off that DM brain. Like
embody.
If you do this is going to have this consequence. And if this, like your brain is on constant active mode when you're a DM, at least in my experience. So I like turning that brain off. But I've noticed just after doing the podcast and covering all the topics that we've covered, covering the history of D&D, I think that's partially what pushed me to end my first campaign. Also, it was just coming to a natural close. I was feeling a little bit of DM burnout, which is something that I thought it was just me, but Ginny D made a video recently about DM burnout, and I felt so validated. So it was a combination of that, a combination of the campaign naturally coming to a close, and also a combination of I want to create my own world and fix all of the problems that D&D broke. Like, I want to make Drow nuanced. I want to give Lolth a kingdom. I want to make sexism not a fucking thing because I'm so sick of it. I want like more inclusivity. I want no alignments. I just want people to have motivations, and their actions, might be interpreted as, good or evil, but I just want everybody to have a reason for what they're doing and why they're doing it. And I think doing our podcast and talking about all these subjects in such depth and like doing the context and really understanding like where this stuff came from, it completely changed my headspace for the campaign that I'm running now. And it completely changed all of the different things that I wanted to tackle as a DM, and like still have like such an amazing, weird, like little experience with the group I have that's always going to be silly, always going to be at least R-rated minimum. Like it's going to be like goofy, but also like having like a more overarching thing and a cathartic thing like in the background that the players can absolutely engage with if they want to. They can engage with these interpersonal relationships that I have built with the NPCs. They can engage with the moral quandaries that I've put into the world based off of, what we've done with the podcast. But also they cannot, and they can just have an amazing time, and that's okay too. Like, and they could just
Yeah,
100%.
do something else, and then the world will burn behind them, you know, and then they won't fix anything, and that's okay. Like, that's a completely valid choice that you can make. But it's completely changed my headspace because I've seen what's wrong with D&D, and I want to fix it at my own table. I want to put my money where my mouth is, and I want to rewrite stuff, and I want to make it just a safe place. I just want my players to feel safe and heard, and I want them to never feel like bad uncomfortable, because there's like a good uncomfortable, right? Like, you do like a description as a DM where it's like, oh, we're both with your skull and their brain comes out, blah, and that's like, oh, gross, why'd you say that? Like, that's a okay-ish uncomfortable, unless that's a trigger for you. Otherwise, you know, put that on your, you know, survey sheet that I send out before I do a campaign. But I don't want anybody to feel bad when they're there. And I think that knowing the people that I play with and playing the people that I play with and knowing their style and knowing that we're all women living in a post Roe v. Wade world and living in a world where women and minority groups are constantly under attack, creating a safe space for all of us. And Lissa isn't in the US, but she hears us and she's an ally. She's a US ally. Like, she's heard me cry about Roe v. Wade, literally. So like, and she let me, bless her heart, like do an episode right after it happened about how the article Dungeons and what is it? Women in Magic.
Distiff gamers.
Yeah, bringing the Distiff Gainer into D&D. It's one of my favorite episodes I've ever done, or that we've ever done, and that Lissa let me do because I wasn't sure if I even wanted to. And she said, no, this is a good idea. And it's all about this awful article that was written in like 2 or 3 years after Roe v. Wade originally was passed, and how this ridiculously sexist article came out in Dragon Magazine, which is an offset of like an official D&D magazine. And like offshooting that with the second wave feminism, like, and how that was happening at the time and how this was so aggressively anti-feminist. Like, how could that exist? And it was a very cathartic episode. Like, it's one of my favorite episodes that I've ever had the honor to do with Lissa. Like, because it was such a cathartic moment. And like, I'm sure you can hear like in our concluding thoughts, like, I'm on the verge of tears. I'm just like, this was great. Like, I needed this. I needed to like yell about women's rights for a bit. And so I want my players to feel safe yelling about that stuff. I want them to feel safe like punching somebody in the face if they insult them, like in my game. I want them to feel a place where like all this crap that's happening right now doesn't matter in the 3 hours that we're together. And I think that's, for me, what feminist D&D means, is just using the wonderful game of D&D that was created by not so wonderful people at times and making it our own and using it as a tool to just be with your friends and create this world together. And be feeling safe and good and empowered doing it, you know?
Yeah.
I agree. I think it's such a strange thing to explain to people that have never touched or played the game, what a tool it is to process things. Because you inherently will always, like, even like I said, like, you could play fucking Bob and the Goblin and you throw him up 5 minutes ago. But you'll inherently always instill a part of you in there, and like in the process of playing, as that character gets fleshed out, you realize that there's like things that you're kind of working through, and you're gonna like kind of place your own traumas on there and like watch it be played out in a safe space of D&D and process that stuff. And it is escapism. It's therapeutic 100% of the time. And like just that element of like, I want, like, when I sit at my table, I want people, like you said, I want them to feel safe. I want them to feel represented. I want them to be in a world where, like, if sexism didn't exist and there were powerful women, like as many powerful women as there are powerful, like, male
if not more,
you know, if not more,
matriarchy, but do it right, you know, like.
Exactly. And like I like to think of it in a way of like, I structure my bad guys and my good guys and their with their own motivations and all of those things, but the like the gender or the sexuality makeup or the race or what have you is a descriptor, but not a deciding factor in that character. It's not a focal point. It's not anything. Like you dictate that person by their actions and what they're doing actively in the world. And across the board, like I have all the queer representation you could possibly imagine, all like the racial makeup, all like, you know, there's not really like a gender hierarchy in my games,
really, no.
or anything like that, because I'm like, I got plenty of shit to make these people make you want to hate these people, and I don't need to rely on a crutch.
Yeah, so many other that you can do.
Yeah. Which, like, you bringing that up and you guys mentioning, like, Drow, like, I also adore Drow, and like Lolth is such a fascinating character.
Mommy
Lolth.
And it's really interesting for me, like in D&D and in like campaign, like in the Vampire Masquerade campaign that I'm working on, and like in my own writing and like plans for novels that I want to write, like how we make our villains, and when our villains are women, how that often gets characterized. And it's like, how do we make an interesting, compelling female villain that is not a villain because of a man, or is not a villain because of they're after petty vengeance, or is not a villain because their only motivation is to like weaponize their sexuality. Not that, like, I mean, listen, like, do it, but it is very reductive a lot of the times. Like, even like I just reread the first 2 ACOTAR books, and like I love them to death, but like looking at like Amarantha as a character in the first one, she was doing it sort of to avenge her sister, which like is valid. So actually, that's not as great of an example as I thought it might be. Crescent City might be a better example, but Ollie hasn't read that, so I won't spoil things. It's a really interesting and fun and compelling thing to think about, of like, how do you make these female villains whole people?
Yeah, even if you do use those old motivations, like, you can absolutely still do that, but put some nuance into it. Just give it a different perspective. Like,
have it not be the
only thing, and have them be like, have them exist without that motivation. Like, or, you know, think about what they do after they get it. Like, do they keep going? Are they more like, oh, I got what I wanted, now I'm just gonna go live off, you know, whatever. And just treat them, I know this is a wild concept, treat them like human beings, and like how they're nuanced, and how they are, like, how they present themselves as like people. And I think as long as you have that in the back of your mind, it's much easier than you think it is. But, you know, with the media, you know, pressing.
Write 3-dimensional round female characters, especially female villains, and not have them just be flat.
Exactly.
I think one of my favorite things is like I had an experience recently. So I have an NPC named Reina, who I have a lot of love for. That is like my baby. I used to play her as a character. She's grown a lot through the years, but I now play her as like, she is in some ways like a DMPC for me, because I love her so much. But like for me, for her and across the board in Trodain, like in the setting of the city and stuff, all the people that I have as like air quotes bad guys are bad guys depending on what side of the coin you're standing.
Yeah, it's all about perspective, really. Like,
it's like everyone has a reason.
It's about like their backstory. It's about their, and like I never understood alignments to the T. It was more so of like, what are their motivations? Are they more motivated for the good of the people, or are they motivated for themselves? Because if you go more themselves, you could go like either they're neutral and they pick and choose, or they are to themselves to the utmost degree, and that's what I would classify as like an evil character.
Exactly. And like with this specific character, so like Mariah's character, Anya, has like a relationship to Reina.
Reina's oldest daughter is Anya, like a childhood best friend of Anya's.
And you've grown up with her as like, that's auntie.
So it's like this terrifying archfey who, like, my Anya's mother and Bryony and Reyna were, like, good friends and pen pals, and, like, had this, Reyna's, like, running her court and also gets these letters with just, like, all random tea and drama and shit. She's like, let me not be a ruler for 2 seconds. Just like, damn, that's crazy.
Because she used to be human, and she remembers what that feels like. And
she needs a little break.
Yeah. And but for you, like, like for Anya's character, like, that's auntie. And then my players did a thing, a really cute thing that
your players know it was me. I'll say that with my whole chest. So what my character went to, like, Witherbloom, which is, like, this it's sort of like the college of, like, kind of life and death and, like,
it's
druidic
like
magic and
campus.
necromantic magic and all of that. And my character Anya is a she will be a vengeance paladin to a death god that's sort of, like, reign over the sanctity of life and death. So she went on to, we're not supposed to be on the Witherbloom campus at night because there's shit that'll eat you. And so Anya went, and because none of our party members trust each other because we all have issues and can't communicate worth a damn, she went by herself onto Witherbloom to go meet one of the deans of Decay because he sort of, like, summoned her. And there's a bunch of other shit that went into that. And of course, she got yoinked by, like, a corpse flower thing and almost died. And, like, Lisette, the Dean of Growth, had to come and, like,
save her.
Massive fireball that shit. And so then we all had to, and Cora went, Reyna's daughter went with Anya, because Anya went, like, I'm going to tell somebody that I'm going just in case I fucking die, because I might. And the girl's like, hey, you're not going by yourself. My mom gave me buku magic items, so I'm going to bring them and go with you.
That was me, the DM, being like, this dumb bitch is about to go in here by herself.
Yeah, but we what was I going to do? Bring the party members that we don't fucking like each other, or we barely talk.
No, I get it.
I was like, there's no way that, like, Anya would bring this very dangerous secret and bring other people in. One, because she didn't want them to get hurt, and two, because she doesn't trust them. Yeah. So my party members ended up sort of toward the end of it realizing that, because we have, like, little, like, decennial ties, there's like
that show you where people are,
kind of like threads of fate that bind the party members. And Anya's was fraying because she was dying. And so they were like, hey, yo, what the fuck? And so they started running toward Witherbloom campus to see what was going on, and arrived, like, as Lisette was, you know, blazing up the monstrous corpse flower. So we were all there. And so it was like, cool, we're going to have a meeting.
Parent-teacher meeting.
Of everyone's parents.
That was involved.
Which, like, Anya's parents are not currently present. So she's living with her godfather, Ambrose, who is another dean. And then Alyssa's character, Jax, lives with his older
brother who works in the government.
Works in the government. Bex's character, Callista,
is a nepo baby from an old money family.
And then we have Cora, whose mother is an archfey and whose father works with the Watcher.
Yeah, who's, like, an eldritch god. These are NPCs that I was like, they're never gonna meet them till, like, they graduate.
Right, and I fucked that up for Ollie because I'm like, sorry, Mommy Reyna has to come.
And I was like, oh fuck,
meet the parents.
So I had to do a lot of mental math and, like, bringing her in because, funny enough, like, two of the players their respective family members work in government, and Oak, the Reyna's husband, is on, like, a government shit list.
Yeah, he's, like, blacklisted. People have been trying to arrest that man for centuries.
So they walk into that meeting, and
everybody had diplomatic immunity.
Everybody has diplomatic immunity because, like, you don't have a magic college with the most powerful, like, families and students or whatever across the board without being like, listen, I know some of y'all are coming from some big bads.
Right. Yeah. Right. It's like the poor dean is just sitting there like, I do not get paid enough to deal with this shit. Trying to orchestrate this meeting of these, like,
so people. I had to do a whole scene of, like, those two men who work in government seeing Oak walk in and assuming him to be the biggest threat in the room.
Right, because Cora's last name is Oak's last name, not Reyna's.
Not Reyna's. And nobody knows about Reyna in that fucking town.
No.
And, you know, Nepo Baby's family, the mom makes a comment, like a pretty derogatory comment towards
breeding,
Cora. Poor breeding.
All that jazz.
And like, I had Reyna have a moment, and, like, Oak just smiling like a fucking giddy.
Oak in a purple suit fucking eating a croissant, just
minding his business.
Minding his goddamn business. He's like, if I need to kill everybody except my daughter and Anya, I can do that. But other than that, I'm gonna let my wife.
I'm fucking chilling. Yeah,
that's mine. I'm gonna stand beside her.
He just like gives his wife a little reassuring pat as like I act out this whole scene of her like flexing some archfey power, and then just like I had a whole monologue of like basically summing up the.
We had worked it out before,
but a whole monologue about being like, you want to talk about good stock, I will slaughter you like the fucking cattle you are.
Yeah.
Kind of shit. And like that moment of like Anya seeing for the first time why someone like your guardian thinks of Reyna as a threat.
Terrified of Reyna, and Anya's just like, that's hot. Like, good for her.
Yeah.
I support Reyna's rights and her wrongs.
Yeah.
But it was funny because we role played that after, and Ambrose was like, Anya's godfather was freaking the fuck out. He's like, you don't understand why this, and she's like, but like you wield shadow magic and Reyna wields shadow magic. Like, I don't see why y'all can't. I don't see why you're so bothered. It feels a bit odd. And he's like, listen, I
play at shadow
practice
puppets
shadow magic. Reyna is the void from which darkness came. Like, these are different things. And it's like, yeah, but also it's Auntie.
Yeah, but also
it's
we
scary.
Support women's
sometimes
rights and
Auntie
Yeah.
Sometimes Auntie has a scary shadow form. Like that, it's fine.
Yeah, but for me, she's the embodiment of like listen, if you're on her good side, she'll move mountains for you. But if you fuck around and find out, you will in fact find out.
You will find out.
And to some people, like, that might constitute as a war crime. I just think of it as justice.
And that's the nuance of it. And so when the players, interact with that kind of stuff, like, it's a moral quandary. And that's a good thing to have in any game. But the fact that it's like a feminine presenting character is even better, because that never fucking happens. It's always in media, a lot of the time, like you were talking about earlier, women are always just bogged down by these very specific stereotypes, which can be done well if there's a little nuance put into it, if there's a new twist on it. But if they're just the flat out stereotypes and just perpetuating all these harmful, views of stuff, it doesn't do much to forward the conversation. It doesn't do much heavy lifting to see female characters as humans. They're just objects. They're just the BBEG. They are their body, or they are their connection to a man in their life, or they don't pass the Bechdel test.
Yeah. They're like a prize to be won.
A prize to be won.
To get past.
Exactly. So applying that knowledge, I think, is a very feminist thing to do. Just treating any character that's femme presenting in your game or any like minority group in your game, just presenting them as human. And if they so happen to be a villain, putting nuance into it, putting thought into it. That is feminist. That is equal. That is feminist D&D to a T. Like, just keep doing that.
It's that like embracing humanity. I know we're talking about like different species or races, and they're not all human or human based, but it's like they all have this inherent humanity within them. Otherwise, we wouldn't necessarily be playing them. I mean, you can always like combine the humanity and the monstrous form, because there are certain ones that, you have a more monstrous past, or you can bring that kind of element into it, but it's all about like creating nuance, I think. And with that, you can break, stereotypes of people. You can break stereotypes of fantasy. You can break stereotypes of, like these characters and these kind of concepts that we have in the real world. And because this is escapism, this is fantasy, and you can like fix it all in this game, like when you do it like in a way that is nuanced and brings like depth to it. And you can also like in that way, you can also explore things of like, how do we fix it? Like, if I make this character like this, does that make them better? Does that make them worse? If it doesn't work out that way, characters can change. You can have an insightful incident that will cause them to, what's the word I'm looking for? Existential crisis. There we go. Existential crisis, and then change their behavior based on outside forces. And that's what I love about D&D is like you're able to try things out, and then if it doesn't work, you can just change it. It fixes.
Yeah. Like we talked about in a recent episode talking about toxic players and stuff. We got off on a tangent about like running characters that have goals that go against the party or that might betray the party or something like that. And our point was like, I was going to do that in the Ravenloft campaign and that character never got introduced, but you can do it, but you have to do it in a way that's very nuanced and intelligent and aware. And I like playing with that. And I like a lot of my characters sit on like I've never met a character with a not traumatic backstory. Like I like playing with the darker aspects of humanity and the darker aspects of my own personality.
That's
and
fair.
I mean, what
those
I think
are really fun.
Every like resides within everyone. And it's like, if a certain set of circumstances occurred and a certain sequence of pressure points were hit, how would you react? And that's also why I like running Vampire the Masquerade, because it's like, well, this isn't D&D. You're not heroes. We're all monsters here. And what you do with the vestiges of your humanity or morality or soul or however you want to characterize it, whatever you do with what remains of that, you are at your core a monster and you only live because you hurt other people. You feed on other humans that are innocent. So where does that leave us when those monsters create a society?
It's that ethical dilemma.
And they're immortal. Yes. And it's so you have these things for like eons old contests and grudges and then you add powers and abilities. And it's just it starts dark. And that's why I liked that, and that's why I chose that to sort of make my debut. Because it was interesting, because it's like, no one's a hero here. And it's like, I think Bex's character is probably the most humane or the most like wants to.
I fully murdered an entire town of people. So
yeah, like she wants to be outwardly the kindest, but even that,
at the end of the day,
some level of that is a facade, right? Because you are all controlled by the hunger and the beast within you. And it's like, that's my shit. I like that. Because it's interesting to look at. It puts you in these sort of edge cases where it's like, I think it's just fun to think about. It's like, what would people do?
What does a world look like where I let my intrusive thoughts win?
Exactly.
And I have zero self-control.
Yeah.
And when somebody talks at me a certain way, I'm like, what if I just ripped your throat out?
It's so freeing, as somebody who's played a couple of chaotic characters. It is so freeing to be like, fuck the rules. I'm just going to do this, see what happens.
Yeah. Be the chaos you want to see in the world.
Especially as somebody who like overthinks everything they've ever done in their entire lives and like guessing.
Same.
Of like, oh my God, if I do this, will they do that? And reading into everything of like, no, fuck it. I'm going to do this and I will suffer the consequences.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's fair. That's my Strixhaven character to a T, I feel like.
Yeah, break the game. Like, literally break it. What other game can you play? Like, what other hobby can you have where you can break it and then you can still create a story and still have fun with the pieces that you pick up? You can't do that with a video game. You can't do that with a book you're reading. You can't do that in like basically any other hobby. Like, break the game. I get on Lissa's case all the time telling her how much she breaks my game because I know she lives for that. So I'm just like, break it more. Break my game.
No, break it. It's fine. Please break it.
I am a chaos gremlin.
Break it. It's fine.
Listen.
Yes, exactly. Be a chaos gremlin. Take risks. Use it. And it's also, important to know that D&D is a very therapeutic thing. It isn't therapy, though. So always talk to your DM, talk to your group about what topics that you want to and you're comfortable with doing, and then have an open conversation about it. I've definitely had conversations with players out of game when I can tell, like, I think this is emotionally affecting you and I want to talk about it, and I'm going to put up a boundary saying that I'm not comfortable. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not trained in any of this. I'm just a storyteller and I'm your friend. So we're going to hash this out and we're going to do whatever makes both of us comfortable, because it's a very delicate thing, the mind, and D&D, it has been used as a therapeutic tool by actual trained therapists. So it's also just very important that everybody's always on the same page when you do find yourself like using it as a cathartic thing. Just so as long as everybody
and it's such
does that, then you should be golden. But always, there's room for error there. Like even if you have everything in place, so be aware of that because I've definitely had that happen before.
It's such an emotionally like vulnerable place sometimes, and like it's a very deep honor to be trusted with that, like as a DM by my friends, and being like, you are giving me all the access to your psyche that I know of you as an intimate friend of yours.
I don't want to break it. Like I don't actually want to hurt you.
I don't want to break it.
Like
no.
Right.
But like it is such a deeply like intimate thing to do.
Yeah. Like an honoring thing to accept that trust and be offered it. But and like for me it's like your big T trauma is not what we're working out. Indeed, and at a table. But you can look, and sometimes things will creep up on you. Like I know we've both had that. Like we didn't intentionally.
It's mostly
think
unintentional.
We were connecting something. Yeah, and then it unconsciously came up, and I think that does present really interesting opportunities to like pause and self-reflect and be like, okay, that's an interesting thing to think about. But yeah, I think it's a lot of mindfulness and communication and all of that,
and creating that safe space to not just like have had a discussion about what is okay to be discussed and not discussed, but also creating like that like comfortable enough environment where your players feel okay to come to you should something come up, and vice versa is so deeply important. And I think that's also like one thing we've noted in a past episode, and especially like right now, is like when I think about feminist D&D, that like emotional vulnerability and being okay with addressing it, I think that's so highly emphasized at like femme presenting and like queer presenting tables.
Oh my god.
That is not as common. Not to say it never happens at male tables, but like it's not as common practice, and it should be.
And also kind of that like self-discovery, that safety, that vulnerability. It is, I mean, culturally it's been built into femininity, but it is very feminist to like upkeep this kind of open honesty and this sharing culture and this kind of self-discovery, embracing who you are, whether it's feminine, whether it's masculine, whether it's somewhere in between and you don't really know yet, but you can use D&D to find who you are. You can use D&D to try out different gender roles. You can use D&D to try out, different pronouns. You can use D&D for, all of this beautiful stuff. And I feel like it's very feminist to use D&D in this sort of like healing way. And allow other people to use it in a healing way, obviously with, lines and veils so you don't cross any boundaries with anyone else, but in this beautiful way to like collaboratively not only tell a story, but also go on this like self-discovery journey. I mean, you don't have to, obviously, like if you don't want to, you can just use it for escapism, but there's that possibility, and some of the people at your table could be using it. So just be like mindful of like, okay, well, this person's clearly having a moment, or their character's having a moment, and understanding that while you may not, be in that place, they might be, and then giving them the time and space to kind of deal with that as well.
100%.
Yeah. So important.
Well, with that, I think that's a great note to end on, and we are coming up on time on our extended because this was such an amazing conversation, and thank y'all so much for coming on. This was great. I would do it again in a heartbeat.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us.
We need a group text.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, this has been great.
This was so good.
We tend to always come on different programs, and they will tell us like, oh yeah, we'll be done in about an hour, and then me and Sherday look at each other and we'll go,
sure.
You don't understand. You don't quite understand how much we talk when we start talking and discussing things.
Yeah, you cannot shut us up.
Like there is no cap and no limit to this.
See, but I love that because me and Mariah have the same problem.
Yeah, we're when we were discussing starting the podcast, and we're like, wow, we can just bullshit for 6 hours, so that's fine.
Which is great. It's a great talent to have. Not great for your editor.
No.
Not great.
Well, our editor's me.
Yeah, our editor is me. So
our condolences.
Yeah. But it's a good talent to have, to like go on all these tangents and have these important discussions. But yeah, once you get us talking about like feminist D&D, we will literally talk for hours about it to anybody who wants to listen on any platform. Like,
incredible.
Yeah, absolutely
incredible. And like cannot recommend it enough. Like as we talked about before, if you want really great, like insightful takes on all things D&D, well-cited sources, very fucking entertaining, clearly.
So good.
Oh my God.
You know, definitely go check out Slovenly Trulls. They're amazing. And you know, even if you are not a feminine or queer presenting person that like is very passionate about feminism, like I mean, my partner thoroughly enjoys.
If you're not in that community, you probably get more out of it because it's education.
Most of the messages we have received have been from men, like literally.
Incredible.
And most of them have made me cry or like tear up, because it's just, we get these emails or these DMs from like usually like men that are our age or even a little bit older, like those who played second edition D&D when it first came out. And I remember this one email I got, just like absolutely, I was almost like bawling my eyes out, because it was such a nice message. They were just like, thank you for like putting this out, for talking about this, for like doing it in such a respectful way. And it's changed. Anytime somebody tells us you've changed the way that we've played D&D, I will cry. Sorry. Like if you say that to me, I'll cry in a good way. And please keep saying it, because that warms our cold, dead heart so much. But like
absolutely,
we get most of those messages from men like who are listening, and that just warms our heart so much, because our podcast is for everybody. Like it's not just for other feminists and other feminist femme presenting people. Like it's for everybody to hopefully get something out of and to have discussions about. And if we get something wrong, call us out and we can have a talk about it. Don't like just leave hateful comments that aren't like have no backing, but like if we get something wrong,
critique versus hate.
Exactly. We're always open to constructive criticism and critique, but not like just hate. Don't be a dick. Like that's our sign off.
Number one rule.
Generally.
Don't be a dick.
General life advice.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, ladies, for coming on. We've thoroughly enjoyed it. Please go check out Slovenly Trulls wherever you get your podcasts. They're bi-monthly, right?
Monthly.
Yeah.
Monthly.
First of every month. Yep.
First of every month. Definitely go check them out. And we hope you have a good one. It's a soft reminder that it is just a game. It's not that serious.
It's not that deep.
And I hope y'all have a great one. Bye. Table Talk is a podcast brought to you by Mythos Media Productions, bringing you a new episode every Wednesday, wherever you get your podcasts. Find us on Instagram and TikTok at Table Talk RPG, or check us out at our website, mythosmediaproductions.godaddyscites.com. All business inquiries can reach out to us via email at info@mythosmediaproductions.com.